Okay, so mixing in solo versus mixing in the mix, okay? So when we have our actual track going on like this is how we want to EQ our instruments. So for example, if we have, let's just remove some of these, and I'm just gonna grab this back. We're gonna go default, okay? So we're back to brand new. So again, if we are gonna mix our music, and right now I'm just focused on the electric piano, and so again, when I'm mixing my music, we are mixing in context of the mix. So if I hit play here, we can hear what's going on. And so if I cut and boost, we want to have a fair volume comparison like we just did, off and on. Again, not to say that we like that, but I'm just showing that's what you can do. The same thing with your kick drum. For example, here is the track going on with that kick. Let's open up an EQ, for example. Okay, again, when you have an EQ with this auto gain built in, you can kind of hear what's going on a little bit better, you know, with the kick drum. So it's trying to keep that kick drum, you know, at a fair volume comparison for us. Like, you know, it sounds pretty bassy. Sounds not bad. I'll turn it back a little bit. Let's say off. You know, is the drum thin? Does it need that extra bass? So again, let's turn off the auto gain, because if you don't have this plugin, now this is like your plugin. I've boosted it, but the volume's louder. So let's pull it back a little bit. Again, I'm mixing in context of the mix. So for example, if we want to maybe cut a little bit or boost some highs on that kick, do you hear how it's cutting through more now? Right? So the high end of a kick drum, and let's solo it out, because many times when people are mixing, you know, they solo out the sound and they do damage to the sound. Watch before. Right? It sounds a bit cleaner. Maybe bring it back just a little bit. Again, I use my scroll wheel a lot. It helps for workflow. It doesn't matter what plugin. The scroll wheel just helps you kind of fine tune it. Okay, so now where should you be soloing is also the question, because there is a time to solo. So let's say we're working on a track, and let's say there's a certain instrument which is causing us problems, or maybe we want to kind of fine tune the kick and bass a little bit more. So for example, kick and bass is super important, because it's like the low end of the track. And so in context of the track, again, I would try to get your mix sounding half decent. Try to get the mix working as it is. If there's any problems that you're noticing, and this is where I would be like, okay, I'm going to solo out the kick and just right click, and we can now left click. And now we have the kick and the bass. So this is with that EQ. This is without it. You know, am I improving it? Maybe. Also, sometimes what I've done in this track is I've done sidechain compression. So let's see here. I think, yeah, this is it. And many times I would even go like a sidechain. So I just push my middle scroll wheel to relabel in an effect, and you go like sidechain, and you can hit F2 to give it a color, and it'll just kind of make it just a little bit cooler to see. You can see it's just tinted a little bit, right? And so if I was doing sidechain compression, which is whenever the kick drum plays, it's reducing the volume of the bass. You can see we're getting some pump going on, right? So this might be somewhere where I quickly just kind of solo out the kick drum to the bass, and we can kind of get some sidechain compression going on. Again, don't worry about my settings. Every kick drum is different. Every bass line is different. So you're always going to have to fine tune it. But you can see I didn't do tons of reduction. You know, so for example, up here it's around 6, and then it's coming down to like 2, so about 4 decibels of reduction. Some tracks you're doing super heavy reduction, right? But that might be an area where I solo out the instrument, but then you have to make sure you go back. Okay, so I might be just kind of quick, like boom. And then I might kind of adjust something quickly. Like for example, if I open up, this plugin, I might just tweak it. And then what I do is I double right click, because right clicking once solos out an instrument. We bring it all back with right clicking again. Okay, here is another really cool approach to it. So let's say you are mixing the track and there's an instrument which is really clogging your mix. You know, maybe it's too bright and you just can't figure out what instrument it is. You can actually work opposite. So you can actually start muting an instrument rather than soloing it. Okay, so let me just show you, for example. So imagine, let's just say, like, you know, one of these instruments was annoying, and we just couldn't figure what it was. So let's just hit play. You can mute a sound. Maybe let's say this bagpipe. So this is actually quite an aggressive sound. So watch, we're gonna disable it. So everything kind of sounds balanced, you know, for the most part. So yeah, this bagpipe, maybe this is aggressive. So I click on the bagpipe, let's say we open up an EQ, and we're like, do you know what? It's a bit aggressive. Let's disable the auto gain, you know, just to make it fair for everyone who has an EQ. Maybe around here, maybe it's aggressive. So maybe we can kind of cut this. We can again increase that volume just a little bit, off and on. Maybe it's not as harsh now, and we now mute it. We can bring it back. So that's a really cool trick, okay? So again, mixing and solo super dangerous, but there is still a time to solo certain things out. Typically, how I would like to approach a mix is I like to try to get everything working as a whole. Okay, so when we're mixing our music, I like to kind of, you know, as a whole, we try to get everything working together. We open up all our different plugins, whatever we're going to do, we're fine tuning it all. If there's a problem going on, you can quickly solo out. So for example, like that kick drum and the bass, I want to make sure that that low end is kind of gelling together nice. Then you want to make sure you bring it back quick. You keep listening, and sometimes, you know, right clicking and holding, working in that same area is nice because it keeps looping and looping and looping. You can fine tune it. And then again, if a problem is happening and you can't figure out what the problem is, you can mute it as well. And you could be like, oh, that's the problem, this one. And then you can maybe quickly solo it, open up an EQ, and maybe kind of try. So for example, let's say, let's just go back to this electric piano because it's more consistent. Okay. So for example, let's say this electric piano was just really, really annoying, right? And there's this, there's a really cool trick. It's just kind of like boosting and trying to find for problem frequencies. And so for example, like I'm saying, let's say we are listening to the mix as a whole. Okay. There is a certain instrument which is bothering you. You're not sure what it is. Again, you maybe muted them and you're like, oh, that's the one right here. You can quickly solo it out. You can now boost and you can kind of listen. So let's just listen for that. So everything's enabled. Or sorry, my bad. Let's just go back to this electric piano. I'm just going to hit play. All right. So for example, you can kind of do this. You can kind of boost where it is, right? And you'd be like, oh, it's right there. That's where maybe you want to cut. And then, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go right back into the mix and you're going to try to fine tune that volume again. Okay. Because we are cutting, you know, now you'd want to boost it. One other really cool thing that the Pro Q3 has is, again, it has this solo band, and you can fine tune that. Like, you know, so again, if there was a certain sound or a certain frequency within this, or frequency range within this instrument, this is where you can kind of fine tune. Again, you can make it smaller or wider. You know, and this allows you to really hear. You'd be like, you know what, that's where the problem is, and you're just going to kind of cut it out. Now, you can also do this with the Fruity Parametric EQ2, but again, it just doesn't give you as good of an experience. But you can enable it right here, and again, look in the top left. It says band solo on shift. Okay, so if you click a band, have to enable it. Holding down shift and clicking, you can kind of get that similar sound. All right. Again, I don't use the Parametric EQ2 very much anymore, so I'm a bit rusty with it, but that is a new feature which can get you a similar sound, but again, it's not like that same kind of FabFilter experience, okay? But again, they're very comparable. I'm always trying to keep things as fair as possible, but I'm telling you that FL Studio with the FabFilter, I'm telling you, is the experience that you want to have. to be a really well-rounded producer, because FL Studio is amazing for making the beat. And then when it comes to processing the audio, again, that's where the FabFilter tools come in. I just want to say that because a lot of times many of you say, oh, I watched the course and third-party plugins were used. So I try to keep things fair. And I hope that is clear when it comes to mixing in solo and different tricks that you have available. You have solo, right? We have muting, and essentially the whole goal is trying to mix as a whole. If you have problems, that's where you can kind of solo out, and you just want to do things quick. Get right back into the mix, okay?